We already know from other criminal cases that perfect families usually only appear that way on the outside and are not actually perfect. For the relatives, and sometimes even for those involved themselves, this disillusionment often comes as a shock. This was also the case with Michele Neurauter. Together with her husband and children, she lived the life of a perfect picture book family. A big house, happy and talented daughters, and a volunteer position that fulfilled Michele. When this perfect image gradually began to crumble, it was anything but easy for her. But she did her best to come to terms with it. But she never would have thought it possible that she would soon be betrayed by the most important people in her life. Michele and Lloyd met in high school in upstate New York. It was love at first sight, and it didn't take long for the two to become a couple. Shortly after graduating in 1991, they got married and attended college together. They seemed inseparable and always appeared very happy to their families and friends. In the years that followed, the couple had 3 daughters, who made their happiness complete. The family soon moved to Corning, New York, and settled in their own house. Michele, who studied literature, stayed at home to look after the children and even homeschooled them. As her daughters got older, she took a job as an English teacher and began volunteering at a homeless shelter. Lloyd was known for his charismatic and extroverted nature. He liked to be the center of attention and was sometimes considered eccentric. He worked as a development engineer and had a particularly close relationship with his middle daughter, Karrie. Karrie was a real daddy's girl from an early age. While she often clashed with Michele, she idolized her father. Lloyd enjoyed this very much and spent a lot of time with her. Among other things, he accompanied her to ballet lessons every Saturday. The Neurauters' life seemed to be going well. At least they always appeared very happy and content on the outside. However, that changed in 2008 when Lloyd lost his job. Despite countless applications over the next few months, he was unable to find a new job. Out of necessity, he eventually took a job in Princeton, New Jersey. His new job was about a 4-hour drive from Corning. To avoid commuting every day, Lloyd usually stayed overnight in Princeton and eventually moved there. This naturally put increasing strain on his relationship with Michele, and it wasn't long before the two separated. After the separation, their eldest daughter moved in with Lloyd in New Jersey. Karrie and her younger sister stayed with Michele. Karrie was not happy about this at all. She would have much preferred to move in with her father, but that was not possible for space and financial reasons. Over the next few years, there were repeated arguments between Karrie and her mother. They just didn't get along well. Karrie reproached her mother for not letting her live with her dad. And Michele herself, of course, only wanted the best for her daughter. But she didn't seem to want to understand that. Nevertheless, at some point it seemed as if they had been able to overcome most of their differences. They now got along reasonably well. They had come to an arrangement. On August 27, 2017, a friend of Michele's arrived at her house. He wanted to pick up her youngest daughter, who was now 14 years old, and drive her to swimming lessons. But no one opened the door. Looking through a window, he thought he could see Michele. Because it was dark inside the house and Michele's silhouette was a little further away, he couldn't see exactly what she was doing. But it seemed to him that she was just standing there motionless and not responding to him. This seemed so strange to him that he alerted the police. When the investigators entered the house, they saw what the friend had not been able to see. Michele wasn't standing. She was hanging. Her body hung lifelessly from the first-floor railing. To investigators, the scene clearly looked like Michele had taken her own life. But there was no suicide note, and there were no indications that the 46-year-old was in a state of mental distress. There was also no sign of her youngest daughter. Karrie, now 19, was informed of her mother's death. This phone call was the first of many things that struck investigators as odd. While Karrie initially appeared completely distraught and was crying, she abruptly changed her tone when asked about her sister and suddenly sounded cold and emotionless. She simply said that her sister was with her. Karrie also stated that she had been with her mother the night before. The two had argued, whereupon Karrie left the house with her sister. That is why she was not at home when investigators entered the house. There had been similar calls to the police in previous years. During their separation, Lloyd and Michele often argued very loudly, and Lloyd even became violent on several occasions. The conflicts usually ended with one of them running out of the house in a rage and calling 911. Michele's mother had also criticized Lloyd's treatment of his daughters. She described his behavior as being like a cult leader. He only had to snap his fingers and the children did what he said. And if they didn't, they had to kneel down and put their hands behind their heads, as if they were about to be executed. Due to Lloyd's influence, which was of course aimed at getting his daughters on his side, they became increasingly distant from Michele and began to obey Lloyd's commands. However, because the police could not yet guess how much Lloyd had manipulated his daughters, they interpreted this as evidence that Michele might have hanged herself after all. Lloyd himself also reinforced this theory. When he heard about Michele's death, he immediately set off for New York. He was in California at the time for a job interview. He told the police that the situation did not surprise him. Michele had already been severely depressed in high school. Because there was nothing else to suggest a violent crime at first glance, Michele's death was soon classified as suicide. Michele's family and friends questioned the police's assumption. They knew that Michele loved her children and would never have taken her own life. And if she had, she would have left a suicide note and would not have done anything that might lead her daughters to find her body. Lloyd was questioned again by the police. He stated that Michele had aggression issues. In the past, she had even destroyed doors in fits of rage. She would repeatedly lose her temper and suffered from various mental health issues. The trigger for the conflicts and outbursts of anger was usually the custody battle for her 14-year-old daughter. This had been going on for 5 years. But the lead investigator did not believe Lloyd. He later said that he had had a bad feeling from the start. In addition, Michele's face was covered with numerous scratches when she was found. And another photo from the crime scene particularly caught his eye. In the picture of the bedroom, you could see that Michele's bed had been violently pushed away from the wall, and there were stains on the wallpaper that looked like blood to him. The investigator began to consider who might have had a motive to kill Michele and make it look like she had hanged herself. There were no signs of a break-in, and no valuables were missing, which made a personal motive more likely. He questioned Michele's family and friends, and asked them if there was anyone who was angry with her. And they all answered the same thing. Michele didn't have problems with anyone. Only Lloyd was angry with her because of the custody battle. It is assumed that Michele died around 1 a.m. on August 27th. She was found around noon. Investigators looked into where Lloyd was at that time. On August 26th, he had spent the day with Karrie. Karrie was moving into an apartment at her university in Rochester. Rochester is about 90 minutes away from Corning. Lloyd helped her move that day. This was also confirmed by surveillance footage from the building. He then spent the night in a motel, drove back to New Jersey the next morning, and from there to his job interview in California. An analysis of his cell phone data showed that he was indeed in Rochester the entire night. So he probably didn't see Michele again. The last person to see Michele alive was Karrie. She was last at home on the evening of August 26th and allegedly left the house after an argument. However, her cell phone data showed that she stayed at her mother's house much longer than she claimed. Her little sister confirmed this. She said she slept on the sofa downstairs and was awakened at some point by her mother's screams. Karrie then came in, grabbed her by the arm, and drove her to Rochester. So it actually looks as if Karrie killed her own mother. But this suspicion could not be maintained for too long. Investigations revealed that petite Karrie would not have been able to place her mother in the house the way she was found. But then, who was it? Lloyd's cell phone data had shown that he was in Rochester all night. Or maybe not. Upon re-examining the motel's surveillance footage, investigators noticed that while Lloyd's cell phone never left the motel, he himself did. He left the motel with Karrie around 10 p.m. and did not return until the next morning. Unfortunately, however, there was no decisive evidence to convict Lloyd, so the police set a trap for them. The police tapped Karrie and Lloyd's cell phones. At first, nothing happened. But when the police pretended they wanted to question Karrie again, they managed to record a phone call. In it, Karrie asked her father what she should do. Lloyd replied, "Tell them I'm sorry. I have a counseling appointment in New Jersey tonight. And tell them that it's been very difficult for you. Could you cry? You can cry and say, 'I'm sorry, I have to go.' God, it would be nice if it were just over. That would be the dream." For the investigators, the conversation was clear evidence that the two were accomplices. So they brought Lloyd and Karrie to the station at the same time and questioned them separately so they couldn't coordinate their stories beforehand. During the questioning, they told Lloyd that they were assuming it was a murder and asked if he could imagine Karrie having anything to do with it. Lloyd replied that he couldn't imagine that, and if so, it would only have been in the heat of the moment, after an argument or something similar. But all of Lloyd's attempts to shift the blame away from himself and his daughter failed the moment the investigators confronted Karrie with what she knew. She confessed everything. Karrie said that her father could no longer pay child support and therefore wanted custody of his youngest daughter. Lloyd and Michele had fought for custody of her for 5 years, and now he had lost the legal battle and had to continue paying child support. He told Karrie about this and said that he saw no way out and would take his own life. Karrie, who had always adored her father and did not want to lose him, begged him not to do it and asked if she could help him in any way. Lloyd replied that the only other option was for Michele to die. Together, they drove to Michele's house that night. Karrie went into the house alone first to check the situation. Her little sister was asleep on the sofa, and Michele was asleep upstairs. She then led her father into the house, who immediately went to Michele's room. She woke up and yelled at him, asking what he was doing. The screams woke Karrie's sister, who quickly left the house with her. Lloyd stuffed a towel into his ex-wife's mouth and strangled her. After she died, he tied her to the stair railing with a rope. Lloyd had spent the last few years doing everything he could to manipulate his children into believing that their mother was a terrible person. This was particularly easy with Karrie, as she had always had a much closer relationship with him than with her mother. Lloyd's arrest proved difficult. While Karrie was still being questioned, Lloyd's interrogation had already ended, and they had let him go. The 48-year-old was on his way to work when he noticed that the police were following him. He stopped at a parking garage and fled to the top floor. He sat on the edge of the roof and threatened the police officers that he would jump. For 90 minutes, the police talked him out of jumping. And in a brief moment, he moved away from the edge of the roof, and that was when he was overpowered by a police officer. Lloyd was arrested, and on February 13th, 2018, the trial began. Karrie, who had accepted a plea bargain, testified against her father. She said that she had not harmed her mother and had only supported her father because he had threatened to take his own life. Lloyd had since confessed. He testified in court that he had manipulated his children throughout their lives. He confirmed Karrie's statements and emphasized that they were not to blame. In December 2018, Lloyd Neurauter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Karrie was sentenced to 1 to 3 years in prison for manslaughter. She was released on January 16, 2020, and was on probation for the following year. Karrie did not reoffend. Jean Laundrie, Michele's mother, did not blame her granddaughter Karrie. In a letter to the judge, she placed all the blame on Lloyd and concluded by writing, "I don't think my daughter Michele would want a long prison sentence for her daughter. She would want her to be able to live a happy life." Since the verdict, Karrie's younger sister has been living with a foster family in New Jersey. And that brings us to the end of today's video. What must go through a person's mind to decide, because of financial problems, to murder the former love of their life and mother of their own children, and even manipulate their daughter into helping them do it? What do you think of this case? Do you think Karrie's sentence is appropriate, or do you think she should have stayed in prison longer? Feel free to write your opinion in the comments. I would also really appreciate a subscription and a like. It really helps the channel a lot and doesn't take much effort on your part. It also helps us trick the algorithm a little bit so that the video can be recommended to people who haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Thank you in advance, and thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.